Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start today with a question. Have you ever really thought seriously about what it means to grow up? About what is the point when you grow up? There are different perceptions across cultures about what this age is or what this point is. Is it 18, 21, 16? Or is it a church confirmation, bar mitzvah, graduation ceremony? Is it defined by your body's maturity? Or is it defined by money when you're financially independent? Many ideas are out there, but do we really examine this? I hadn't seriously thought about it until I was coming up to the end of college, about to enter full-time work. I thought about, is it the day I graduate when I'm a grown-up? Or is it the day when I start my first day of work? Or when I move into a house that's not on the college campus? Or what is this day? Or am I already grown up? Have I been grown up since I started college? Was it when I left home? So at what point am I grown up? This question is at the center of my thoughts today. But why is this important? You might as well be discussing at what point do you become well-read, or at what point do you become culturally aware, or at what point do you become a morning person. But no, growing up is a turning point that every single person faces in their life. And even past that, I believe the point of growing up is closely linked to the point in which we enter into our life's purpose and meaning. Do you want your life to be purposeful and meaningful? I know the answer is yes. So, what is growing up? First, I want to dispel the myths of what it means to be a grown-up.
I won't grow up. I won't grow up. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. Just to learn to be a parrot. Just to learn to be a parrot. And recite a silly rule. And recite a silly rule. If growing up means it would be beneath my dignity to climb a tree, I'll never grow up. Never grow up. Never grow up. Not me. Not I. Not me. Not me.
Pushes that person over at the end. So this vision of growing up makes it seem like you become a parrot, you're following rules, and never thinking for yourself. But in this song, there are a lot of half-truths about growing up, which are the most destructive forms of truth. The truths they relate to have to do mostly with framing growing up in terms of the hardest and which is this main hard truth of growing up, that you're responsible for yourself. That's this part that scares us. You're responsible for your actions, for your finances, even your own motivation. And also, your actions or failures to act begin to have consequences that extend beyond you. So that's the negative way to look at growing up. And I want to start with that honesty. Peter Pan also makes growing up seem boring, where you never have fun, where you have to care about being professional and dignified. This is where people say growing up is sitting at a desk from 9 to 5, doing something they don't like, then going home unhappy, watching TV, then waking up dreading the next day. But in college, don't some people already sit falling asleep in desks, in classes they don't like, going home unhappy, watching Netflix, then waking up dreading the next day? So I think these are symptoms I've seen of not growing up. It's of feeling increasingly isolated, but powerless to overcome it. Being with people, but feeling shallow. Trying to do things that make you happy, but turning into shorter and shorter moments of happiness, and that they start to leave you empty when you think you should be full. My idea is college is the time to grow up, but not in the negative or boring sense. But I want to be here today to give you the view that is missing, the positive view of growing up. The positive view of flourishing wherever you are. What if the best way to enjoy college was to grow up? What if you started to enjoy life the way you are going to enjoy it for the rest of your life? So who am I to state these ideas about growing up? Well, I don't know everything about growing up, of course, and I don't want to imagine that I do. But I feel I'm in a unique place of nearing the end of my 5th year of undergrad and having many close friends who've already graduated, and also many friends who've just started college. And I think I have this unique perspective of life after college and what people can get out of CMU. I hope to speak into things that will help those in college navigate these training grounds of the real world. I see college as an intense version of the life to come, things really being pushed at you, and you can either come at it and grow, learn, develop, or you can shrink back, do the minimum, and become increasingly dissatisfied. So how to grow up? What should we not shrink back from? What are the positive things to take hold of in growing up? I have 2 main things that I'll talk about. The first involves how I define the turning point of growing up. I see that turning point as the period of life when you begin to give more than you receive. Think back to your childhood. When you were born, everything was given to you: food, clothing, a bed to sleep in, a place to live and be safe. We're given an education, taught knowledge about the world, and we're given the most precious knowledge of all, knowing that people in our life care about us, the gift of love. And then there slowly come times when those things are not as much given to us anymore, and we're brought into an expectation of giving them to others. We learn how to love others from very early on, but grow into learning the challenging journey of how to love when others may not love you back. Our knowledge must be more sought out for ourselves. Education becomes less compulsory, and we have to start paying for it instead of it being provided. And food, clothing, housing eventually become our own responsibility and become shared and then given to others, especially if one is married or has children. Here in college, however, we're in this in-between, with much variation person to person, of course, but many things are still given to us, and we become slowly more independent. I see it as a training ground for adulthood. A fellow Erik with a K, Erik Erikson, who was a psychologist in the 1940s, developed an 8-stage theory of general human development. The claim is that in each of these 8 age periods, there's a crisis and a conflict that demands resolution of us before we can develop into fully functioning human beings in the next stage. The crisis of the teenage years, 12 to 19 years old, is that of identity versus confusion. This by nature is focused on ourselves and asks the question, who am I, really? A quick side note, I do not recommend defining your identity purely in your major or career. That won't lead to happiness, because you're more than your major, you're more than your career. But the crisis of the early 20s, 20 to 25 years old, is that of intimacy versus isolation. The question becomes not just who am I, but who am I in relation to others? Life becomes less about us and more about our relationships and how we fit into others' lives. To me, this question of adulthood and our college years becomes, what do I have to give to others? In my junior year of CMU, I faced a crisis of my own. I was in the last class of my ECE track in computer hardware in a course called Introduction to Computer Architecture. In the intensity of this course, I came to a realization. I was good at this, but my heart wasn't in it. I lacked the passion to be consumed in this world of bits and bytes, and just thinking about the next 20-hour lab I had to complete for the class made me actually physically nauseous, filled with dread. I stepped back and wondered if I had been asking the right questions. I had been concerned about finding my passion, but was that really what I should be concerned about? What was my goal in life? You might have had classes that make you ask that question. And this key question, what do I enjoy doing that benefits others? I started to realize it's not about being at the top grade-wise or skill-wise. As I neared the end of my time here, I realized more and more why I was here all along, to learn. The world doesn't need people who are plastered with gold stars, glittery A's, and nice resumes. The world needs people who know what they're doing, care about what they're doing, and are doing something with what they know to help others. I believe everyone was made for their very own and beautiful purpose on this earth. Some of these purposes rank higher and happen to be more valued in the man-made constructs of the world, but everyone has something to give. Now, if you knew me growing up, you'd know I loved making videos, making up games, and telling stories. And as I grew older, I started to love teaching, and in college, I became more comfortable using sign language in front of others, which I had learned at an early age. In college, I also became exposed to programming and really enjoyed making websites in my courses. So during this junior year, in this crisis, I thought about what I had to give and what I enjoyed most, and it brought one thing first into my mind, in teaching my student-taught course of sign language. It was my absolute favorite part of my week. I still looked forward to teaching 20 of my fellow students about sign language and deaf culture through videos I had made of pop songs in sign language. It was satisfying in a way my studies couldn't be, because studies were taking information. But here I was able to give what I've been itching to do, give, create, and generate something unique for others to benefit from. So I wanted to show an example of a homework assignment video from week 6 of the course, filmed at CMU's Carnival.
Compared to the friends at last. See, we won't forget where we came from. The city won't change us. We beat to the same drum. No, we won't forget where we came from. This city can't change us. We beat
So during this crisis point junior year, luckily I had a combined set of realizations that this related to educational technology, which was a field that I could explore, and that this field was something that existed at CMU in the HCI department, and that there was a thing called fifth-year scholars that I could apply to explore this area. And then through a project for that application, I could start an educational technology club. And then through all this, I could combine and share these interests and passions and my loves of teaching and education with others. With this realization stemming from that simple question, I entered this fulfilling place where I could focus on and towards something I genuinely enjoyed, something I was genuinely excited to give to others. So you're probably thinking, cool, great, I'm not so sure I have a passion like that. I'm not so sure I have much to give. But that thought is a lie. Everyone has much they can give to others, though it will be different for each person and may not even seem exciting to you at first. But the best thing to do to find the things we enjoy that benefit others is to start with the second half of that. What are the things around you that you can pursue that benefit others? I was pursuing things I enjoyed, like digital hardware, believe it or not, but pursuing things to benefit others, like I was with teaching my STUCO and being an RA, enjoyment later came once I committed to those things. It's paradoxical, I think. We find ourselves when we lose ourselves in serving others. This is a big part of my faith and my worldview, and it applies here in discovering our passions. When we're so caught up in being a servant to others and engaging with the problems right in front of us, we eventually discover the things that most fulfill us, the things that we were made for. So if you feel discouraged, encourage others through the things you have to give. If you don't have a passion, don't worry. Just do things without being so caught up in that. The things you give yourself now, fully give yourself to, will bear fruit someday, just like all those prior experiences combined into my sign language course. Don't sit around waiting for your passion to show up. Get into the opportunities right in front of you, and your passion will show itself in time. What do I think growing up really means? It means creating for yourself the opportunity to enjoy and discover the meaningful and good things in life instead of them being handed to you. What at first seems like negative responsibility become positive opportunities for making meaning in our lives. This is adulthood, not living for ourselves anymore, but living for the benefit of others. And then we'll have a richer life than we ever could have imagined when we were just playing with toys and blocks and the pencils on our desks. This is giving over receiving. Now on to the second point, what I call putting interdependence over self-sufficiency. Interdependence here means mutual dependence, where people rely on each other, as opposed to independence, or what I'll call self-sufficiency. I define self-sufficiency here as being able to live or function without help or support from others. I'm not talking just basic needs, but the thought that someday we'll be in a place where we don't need to rely on anyone else. Contentment will come from ourselves, our own inner peace, our own security, our own protection. One day we'll have everything we need. What I'm saying about self-sufficiency is that it's a goal our culture tricks us into pursuing, when really it can destroy us. So much of our lives we try to convince ourselves that we can do this on our own, that one day we'll be stable and we'll be content. But at the same time, we strongly desire to help others. If everyone believed the lie that they were self-sufficient or would be someday, what was that desire made for except to show us that we would never be? And the fact that we are not is a beautiful thing because it's the start of being able to open our eyes to a glimpse of the kind of lives we were made for, the cycle of giving and receiving I talked about earlier, each generation giving to the next, each a little further along than the one before, bringing them along the well-trodden paths of life. But the fact is that we also never stop receiving. For what you have that you did not receive, and if you did receive it, why keep it as if it's only yours? What hinders us from interdependence? I think it's the fear, the natural fear of trust in knowledge and people beyond ourselves. Even as a child, that's the first thing we learn. Back to Erikson's theory of life stages, the first stage, or crisis, is trust versus mistrust. If one has successfully navigated that stage at a very young age, in old age, the culmination of this is an appreciation of interdependence. I've been talking of growing up, but there's something in childhood that we should never let go of. It's this trust of knowledge and people beyond ourselves. Think of an infant. Even if they could articulate themselves, they don't know much. Yet there's a contentment that a baby has in her mother's arms. This contentment comes from trust. Yet why, when we get older, do we try to trust others as little as possible? We create structures in our life to make fallback plans and have our life be as predictable and safe as possible. We try to gain enough knowledge that we can be content in our knowledge, that we can always have the right answers, and that we can avoid mistakes. But just as trust of knowledge and people beyond ourselves sustains us when we are a helpless child, it also sustains us when we are a wandering adult. We must come back to a humble place of trusting in others. If you remember back to Peter Pan's song, there's a deeper meaning behind it. He's saying that if being a grown-up means following rules you don't want to please people that make you do things you don't want to, then he doesn't want to grow up. Self-sufficiency says, I want what's best. Therefore, it never makes sense to do what other people tell me, things that I don't want to do. However, this idea is nonsensical. Hopefully, your personal experience has shown you that to do what's best often involves doing things you don't want to do for reasons beyond what you know. Peter Pan lives in this shrouded mentality that hides him inside only what he knows, tucked away in Neverland. This idea of self-sufficiency also traps us inside the known. It takes us away from risks because we may risk our safety. I claim that the things most worth doing involve a risk. The things most worth doing involve trust and knowledge in people beyond ourselves. Think about the things in your life you're most glad you did. The things you're glad for looking back, the things that make you say, I'm so glad I did that, are always the things that involved a risk at some point along the way. Whether it was in a person or in an opportunity, something in that experience came through in a way that you couldn't have predicted, and it was memorable and meaningful to you. I'll give an example from my own life. When I was in middle school, I didn't understand why I was more attracted to men than women. I was confused. I did things I was ashamed of, but I wanted to solve it myself. I kept it inside until college, when I started being able to talk to others about who I was and what I was facing. As I began to tell people close to me, I saw how valuable it was to rely on others. Even though it was scary and risky, it was so worth it. Just this past year, about 2 months before gay marriage was legalized, I shared a blog post on Facebook about my views on that issue, but also shared who I was as a gay and celibate Christian. It was my first time sharing this with such a wide audience. But I was overwhelmed with support, and my relationships entered a new depth of meaning, honesty, and openness. This is an example of interdependence. I want to make one clarification because of who I am. People may think the peak of interdependence is marriage. People may also think a great marriage or a great immediate family is the peak of interpersonal relationships, perhaps even of a successful life. However, I plan not to marry and to remain celibate because of who I am in my sexuality and my faith. And I found contentment in this, beauty in this, because marriage is joyful, but not the greatest joy. I believe interdependence and friendship and community can go beyond even the satisfactions of having a family of your own. I see my definition of family and interdependence as even larger than that. I also want to give an example of trusting in knowledge and people beyond ourselves. In middle school also, I would stay awake at night, lying in my bed, thinking about the prospect of eternity. I thought about the idea of heaven as I heard in church in the afterlife, and it scared me. Spending one day there and then realizing you had just as many days as yesterday, and in 1,000 years from now, you'd still have just as many days and years left to spend. It was something beyond my understanding and sparked me into entering into my Christian faith and knowing God, which is now the thing most precious to me. But it involved a willingness to submit to knowledge and people beyond my own, to discover the things that were beyond me. When others speak of religions with words saying it's foolishness, doubting the validity of things they cannot prove, I think of this, that the things most worth living for are the things that we cannot see, that we cannot prove. Friendship cannot be proven. Love cannot be seen. Happiness cannot be measured. They are meaningful, even if we cannot measure how full or how exactly they are to be full. Everything that can be seen and measured will one day fade. The buildings around us, the organizational structures we live in, even much of our modern knowledge and expertise. Every 400 years or so, we look back and say, how foolish was that generation for their knowledge in science? There was so much they didn't know. But to look at faith and call it foolish is like calling a baby foolish for trusting his parent. And then now I realize what heaven will be like according to Christianity. It will be the simple reliance upon a Father who not only gave us life, but formed us for a purpose, to be with him and enjoy him as we are made to enjoy, forever. This is something that's often missed. We are made to enjoy, we are made to relate, we are made to rely, and even these qualities themselves are interdependent. To bring it back to earth, think of someone who exemplifies self-sufficiency. Do you really want to be around them? They're proud, never truly happy or content, and complaining when things don't go their way. They think you're not needed, but they also think they're always right. They reject others' opinions. They get bored really easily. They're controlling and demanding. They don't like being asked for help because they don't ask for help. I hope I've shown that self-sufficiency is not the way. What is the way? Being humble, trusting in others, trusting in knowledge and people beyond yourselves, living in simple moments of happiness, trusting when things don't go your way that it's just a passing phase, appreciating others, admitting when you're wrong, accepting others' opinions different than yours and hearing them out, and becoming fascinated in those differences and things you didn't know before. Coming alongside others, encouraging them, yet also asking for help when you need it. This is what interdependence looks like. This is what growing up well looks like. This is the joy of growing up. This is what I want so badly for more of my generation to enter into more fully. We'll never be happy on our own merits and in our own knowledge or our own accomplishment. You have to own up to the fact that your life is not your own. It is meant to be both given to others and interdependent with others. I think it will be beneficial to note 3 fears that get in the way of trying to live this kind of life. The first is the fear of commitment. A self-sufficient person doesn't like commitment. For the deeper the commitment, the higher the doubt and deeper the risk that it may not be worthwhile. This fear is responsible for the marriage age getting later and our generation having more Facebook friends and less real close friends. It leads to isolation when you don't have commitments. Even when it's hard, even when you mess up, staying committed will overcome your isolation and your doubts. The second fear is the fear of uselessness, the thought that I can always be more, I can always do more. This fear of uselessness tells us that we must be busy for life to be worthwhile. But it is usually those who stop, pause, take a walk, sit down without the computer or the phone, and just stopping to think for a good half hour about purpose in life. Our life is most useful when we take time to stop and think about what that use is. The third is, as I've been talking about, the fear of trust and knowledge in people beyond ourselves, which has led to a dwindling practice of faith in our society and leads to a shallowness and ignorance of weightier matters altogether. I've said a lot about self-sufficiency and interdependence. I hope these 3 fears somewhat bring it all together and make it applicable. Don't fear commitment. Don't fear uselessness. Don't fear trust and knowledge in people beyond yourselves. Take hold of commitment and remain steadfast. Stop the busyness to consider and latch on to your purpose for being alive. Open your minds to things beyond what you know. Delve into questions you've been afraid to ask, things you've been afraid to admit, risks you've been afraid to take. Interdepend. Growing up means participating in the intergenerational process of receiving and giving, and realizing that your life is not your own, and that it never was, but it is a gift, and you are to give to others as it has been given unto you. Life may not be about you anymore, but leaving that you find what was always waiting for you, not an easy life, but also not a boring life, a life with purpose and real satisfaction, a life well lived. You can overcome busyness with contentment in who you are and your purpose and what you have to give to others, being committed to depth when you are with people, and dedicated to interdependence, not grasping after a false self-sufficiency. I hope to see you when you graduate this place, here as I'm to do in a few short weeks, as someone who is joyful, giving, and interdependent, someone who has learned to grow up, appreciate growing up, and love this time of life for the exciting and meaningful transition that it is. Don't be scared of growing up. A joyful, satisfying life is waiting for you to enter in. Grow up, and I promise you, you'll never look back to what you left behind. Thank you.